Hello and welcome to the first ever Content Talks Toronto podcast called Marketing Talks. I am Michael Smith, founder and host of Content Talks, which if you've stumbled upon this by accident, Content Talks is a regular content marketing panel and networking event in Toronto, Canada, and now a podcast. So why a podcast, you might ask? Obviously we're living in some unique times at the moment. I made the decision to indefinitely postpone all future events in light of COVID-19. But I want to keep the community going, so I've decided to launch this podcast in its place, at least for the moment. So I'm going to be talking with marketing professionals about their career paths, as well as picking their brain for practical tips you can take to your own day-to-day roles. And my first guest is actually the first panelist I ever had for Content Talks with, and that is Emily Baillie. I've known Emily for around 5 years now, and she has a wealth of knowledge as a marketing consultant and marketing educator. Initially, I had asked Emily to come on to talk about working from home tips. Obviously, it's something that we're all finding ourselves doing at the moment. But we ended up talking about a lot more, including her own career and how she ended up becoming working for herself as a consultant as well as an educator. I did have an intro prepared and initial questions to ask her, but we just ended up chatting straight from the get-go about her work, and I just kept the record button going, so the conversation might seem a little bit sudden. Before we start though, I do want to point out this conversation might be about being productive, especially in the current climate. We're in a very unique situation. We all have different ways of dealing with this, and if you're not feeling like you want to be productive right now, that's okay. Take what you learned today, and store it for another time. But without further delay, here's my conversation with Emily Baillie.
Do you like working from home?
I'm not hating it. I've always been kind of against the idea. I like the idea of having flexibility, but I do like having somewhere to go. What about you? Have you ever actually had an office job?
I have, yeah. So for about the first almost 10 years, maybe 8 years, I don't know. Since I graduated from university, I did work in 9 to 5 jobs. So I worked in communications departments and marketing departments at a few different organizations. And it was good. It was a good experience. I think I needed to do that to really get confident before I was really going to go out on my own. But one thing I'll talk about a little bit more is that I just realized that wasn't really for me. That was before working from home was really more, I think it's a little bit more common now. What I didn't like about working from an office with the 9 to 5, this sounds almost silly, but it's the truth, is I just didn't really like the grind. I didn't really like that routine of having to wake up at a certain time, get on the subway, you're jammed in with thousands of people, someone's coughing on you, and then if you wanted to leave early, let's say you wanted to go to the cottage on a Friday, let's say, you'd have to often ask somebody, is it okay if I leave a half an hour early to go and try to beat the traffic and so on? And some managers are really cool with stuff like that, but some really that cool with that sort of thing. And I just found the repetition of same old every single day for me was something I didn't really thrive in. I like having more autonomy. If I wanted to start my day with a particular project, I wanted to be able to do that, and then or start earlier, finish earlier. That type of flexibility I find just works so much better for me and my personal style.
So, how long have you been working from home? Because I feel like we met, I want to say 5 years ago at a Travel Massive. I'm not sure on the timeline, but I feel like it would have been about 5, and you've kind of been carving your own path this whole time, which to me was really impressive to see you go from someone trying to get freelance jobs to then being a full-time consultant now and a marketing educator. So how long have you been doing that, and what kind of pathway did you take to get this career?
Yeah, so I feel the past 5 years have just flown by, and I've been working from home, I think, about that long. That said, I always have arranged my schedule such that I'm not 100% working from home. So I think that's a key distinction for those who may be considering doing this after this pandemic thing. When people are a little bit more back to normal. For me, I wouldn't want to work at home 100% of the time. What I like is being able to go into events, go into meetings, go in, do the odd project perhaps out of a client's office if that works. And luckily I've been able to do that. So I'll sort of start at the beginning. I was working over the years, I'd worked in several different communications and marketing roles for different organizations in Toronto. I worked for the University of Toronto for a few years. I worked for a travel company, Kensington Tours, for a while as well in marketing. I worked for the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. Way back when I first graduated, I was in their marketing or communications department rather. And so those roles, I think, really helped to prepare me for doing work on my own in terms of getting the skills and so on, getting my chops, as you might say. But I went out on my own about 5 years ago now, and I did that. At the time, I told myself, okay, I'm going to try this. I'll do it for a year, let's say, and see if it works. That was my sort of cushion I gave myself. And I didn't know at the time, of course, we never can predict these things, but I didn't know if this was really going to catch on or if I was even going to thrive doing it. I felt like it was the next right step for me. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a whirl. I already had a client lined up, like one solid client. So I'll be honest about that. I wouldn't suggest anyone just like open up shop and like quits their job and like, burns any bridges unless you have something, at least sort of something to sort of go on and build from there. At least that's how I did things. And in the beginning, I was really sort of focused on travel and tourism. So like you, Michael, I really love to travel. And I really loved working with tourism clients, different organizations, high-end travel companies, adventure travel companies, DMOs, destination marketing organizations, Ontario Travel, Toronto Tourism, those kind of groups. It's just so much fun to work with them, with the content and so on. But I sort of evolved to sort of move into other sectors as well. I love travel and tourism and I always will, but I found that was a little bit too narrow for me. And I'll be frank, sometimes those clients don't pay the best.
Yeah, a
For
lot of
me,
competition
I
for.
wanted to. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of people who will do it for very little, and that's totally cool. But for me, I was like, okay, where am I going with this whole thing? And like, how am I going to actually make a living off doing this? Because as you know, I now have a baby. And, once you start deciding you want to move in that direction, settling down or whatever you want to call it, you do kind of have to think a little bit more like practical, or at least I did. So I was like, okay, how can I do what I love to do, but still make this work in a long-term way? Because I was really enjoying it. And I was like, okay, now I know I can actually do this and I can actually, pay my bills and have some money left over for other things. And I think for me, there was momentum. Momentum is such a powerful force. So once I started getting a few things rolling, it sort of snowballed from there. And because things were snowballing, my confidence was growing. So I wasn't as hesitant to say, put myself forward for things or interesting projects that, maybe in the past I would have been a little bit too shy, or I would have kind of gone, well, I don't know if I'm quite, I don't know if I have all the things they're looking for in the listing and so on. I sort of moved past that and kind of went like, you know what, if I have 75% or 65% of the things that they're looking for and I can learn while doing, which by the way is the case with any project anyways, then I'm going to ask about that. So it kind of grew from there.
So you're saying like you see opportunities that you think you can take and at least meet the majority of the criteria. Like where are you seeing these opportunities?
That's a great question. So I've gained a lot of contracts from word of mouth. So people who I know will recommend me, or they'll say, "Hey, I thought of you when I saw this," and then they'll send me a link to something, an RFP or a job post or something like that. Um, Going to events and
Hmm.
networking, talks like content talks, of course. There's many other ones out there. Toronto's such a hub for these types of things, so I would make my presence sort of known at events, not in a big sort of show-offy sort of way, but just sort of, I would say, okay, this is relevant to my industry. I'm interested in this topic. I'm going to go by myself to this event because, by the way, if you go with a group of friends, you're probably not going to come away with a lot of new contacts, I find.
Well, that's great
I'll
advice.
go by myself. Yeah, I'll go by myself, even if it feels a bit awkward at first. And I'll say to myself, okay, I'll talk to at least one person, and then I'll give myself permission to go home. So sometimes I would end up talking to more than one person, but if I talked to one person or made one contact, then I would say, okay, that was worth the price of admission, so to speak.
Hmm.
So it was a bit of that. And then also just a bit of like asking. So as you know, I teach marketing at a couple of different schools and also with the Canadian Marketing Association. And people in marketing ask me all the time, how did you get into teaching? How did you get into teaching? They think that they want to do it. And I'll tell them, like, I literally like asked, like, I didn't sit and wait for like a job posting to come up, because a lot of opportunities, as you know, are not advertised. I reached out to the folks who were sort of coordinating the project, or they're coordinating a program that I wanted to learn more about, and I reached out to them, and not everybody wrote me back. So I reached out
Hmm.
to, say, maybe, like, I don't know, let's say 10 people when I was first interested in doing some part-time teaching. Maybe like two, three, or four of them wrote me back, and that's fine. But from those, three or four people, I ended up going in to meet with one of them who was very kind. And he said, well, why don't you do a guest lecture in my class? It was a PR class at Humber College. Of course, it wasn't paid or anything like that, but I was happy to do it. So I went and did a guest lecture in his class. And then he said, that was really great. If you actually are still interested in teaching, I'll keep my eye out for you if anything comes up here. So we kept in touch. And then maybe like 6 months to a year later, something actually did come up. And that's how I got my first contract teaching job. So
Yeah.
if I hadn't have asked, or if I hadn't have like, or if I had been like, oh, this person did write me back, I'm just gonna like stop and feel sad. Like nothing would have happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's interesting you talk about momentum and networking. Like, I mean, when we met, I knew you were into travel and you were kind of taking a more of a content marketing angle with it, whereas a lot of people at the time were just travel bloggers and they were looking for trips. Or, I worked at Travel Week at the time, and we had a Air Canada special newsletter going out, and I thought of you straight away because I'm like, this is someone like it's content marketing. It's someone who is in travel. Like this hits both angles. Whereas if we just got on a blogger, it would have made sense. Or it really is about networking. And then maybe like that was probably 2 to 3 years after I met you that opportunity came up, and I thought of you. And it's just like a lot of people like I see they come to my event and they're unemployed, and then they stop coming because they got a job. I'm like, no, you got to build these contacts for down the track when it means something. And I think that's really important, is that you got to stay in the game essentially when it comes to networking and getting your name out there, and not being big and bravadous about it and doing like TED Talk kind of esque events, but doing groundwork where you just meet one person one on one.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing I wanted to add for folks who are considering transitioning into self-employment or opening up their own business or something like that. I did freelance work while I was still working my 9 to 5 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for probably 2 or 3 years. So that meant that I would work my 9 to 5 job, I would go home, and then evenings and weekends, I would do extra projects. So I would do some writing gigs, I would do some blogging, I would do some freelance work, some content creation, a little bit at a time. And not only did that help me sort of build my portfolio and explore what this was really what I wanted to do, but it also helped me develop the skills to manage my own stuff. Because otherwise, if I didn't have those skills, I was used to being sort of told what to do, so to speak. And then I was like, okay, now I'm just like here on my own all day long. I think it would have been hard for me to like structure my days and keep myself on track, because nobody's really overseeing you when you work for yourself, right? You're accountable to yourself. You're of course accountable to your clients, but if you mess something up or something doesn't work out, like they're just never going to call you again.
Yeah.
And that just burns. So you really have to, I think, be the type of person that can manage themselves in an effective way. That doesn't mean I'm always like nose grindstone, like first thing in the morning. It just means that I've kind of learned how to manage my own time and prioritize, okay, what really needs done right now and what can I maybe put off until later today or tomorrow. And if I'm not feeling that good, you get sick or something like that, like how are you going to manage that on your own? You have to kind of think those things through. And I also have a lot of friends and contacts who are sort of doing the thing that I'm doing. So that's really important too, because then I can shoot them a line if I'm kind of stuck or I'm like, I have this situation with a client, I don't really know what to do. I have sort of a little bit of a network there for support, and I could call in people to maybe even help me with a project if I needed to, which kind of makes me feel, a bit more, just a bit more confident that if something came that was like a huge project that I wouldn't want to say no to, but at the same time, I would want to be able to scale up a little bit to make it happen.
Yeah. Well, actually, that kind of brings me to what the topic I kind of wanted to ask you about is like some tips for working from home, because a lot of us, like myself, I've been working home. This is now my 4th week, first time doing it full time at least. How do you stay productive and stay motivated while you work from home?
That's a great question. And you're right. I feel like everybody right now is figuring out how to work from home, and organizations that never really allowed or really wanted their staff to work from home are now sort of forced to let them do that. And people are kind of trying to figure out, okay, how can I actually get my stuff done while I'm at home, while there are distractions? So the first thing I would say is try to eliminate some of those distractions. So it can be tempting to have the TV on in the background, for example. I never watch TV during the day. I could, but I just don't find that it makes me feel very good. I feel like I'm kind of just sitting around at home. Like I almost feel like I'm unemployed if I'm like sitting at home watching TV during the day. This is just for me, of course. Everyone has to find their own sort of path. But so no TV. Music is fine. Even podcasts, if that works for you, that could be nice to listen to while you work. I would say don't sleep in, even though that is tempting as well. I'm not a huge morning person, I'll be honest. I know a lot of people aren't. So I don't start my day at like 7 a.m. But I will start at say 8:30 maybe. I try to pick a time and stick to it. Often what ends up happening is I'll check my emails first straight away just to kind of see what I'm dealing with, what came in the night before and so on. But try not to spend too much time surfing the net, and that includes social media. So it's a really tricky balance because I work in content marketing. I know a lot of folks listening to this probably work in marketing or some related field. And social marketing is such a powerful force. And a lot of us are actually managing social media accounts as well. Maybe it's for our personal brand, maybe it's for our a corporate brand or a business we've started. So the trick there is to manage those, your LinkedIn, your Instagram, your Facebook, whatever those platforms are, without being so stuck in the weeds all day, because that can really, really eat up your time. So scheduling content ahead of time is really useful, using a scheduling platform. And then maybe saying, I'm going to check my feed 3 or 4 times a day. So maybe you check it first thing in the morning, you check it maybe at lunchtime, maybe you check it again at, say, 3 or 4 p.m., and then you check it in the evening. If you're on there all the time, what's going to happen is you see other things that interest you, and then you click on those things because they're cool and they're useful, but then you go down that sort of rabbit hole, and you're not getting paid for that time. You're not getting paid to surf the web. You're not getting paid to look at other people's social media. So you have to be really careful with that. And spending too much time on something can really eat up your your how much money you're making. So you have to kind of say to yourself, okay, if I'm getting paid X amount a month, let's say, or a week, or an hour, however you're charging your client, how many hours am I actually going to devote to this project or this assignment? So if you're getting paid like not a ton of money for something, you can't be spending too much time on it. You just can't. So that means you have to hold yourself to X amount of hours. You don't have to tell the client that, of course, but you might say, okay, if I'm getting paid, say, $500 for this, then I'm going to devote 5 hours or 10 hours or whatever that sort of hourly rate is for you, and then stick to that. So that you still have time, you still have space for more projects. Even if those projects haven't come through yet, you have time then to build your business. So those business building activities should form maybe 30%, I would say, of your time. And those are things like personal branding. Those are things like networking events. Those are things like chiming into a discussion on LinkedIn. That can be, if you do social media advertising for your business, whatever that looks like for you, but you need to have time left over and energy left over to do those things too.
And that's a good point. You talked about like chiming in on LinkedIn, and how do you go about marketing yourself? Now that we have to do it online, because you're one of the best I've seen especially when it comes to like LinkedIn. Any tips on how to promote yourself online in the digital world?
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. There's so many people that I like to follow and I draw inspiration from as well. So I definitely am always observing what those industry leaders are doing in my space. I follow them on LinkedIn. I follow them on Instagram if that applies to their sort of case. But I try to contribute to meaningful discussions on LinkedIn, and I try to do so with people who are established, people who are credible. And when I comment on something on LinkedIn or I share something on LinkedIn, I make sure to add my sort of perspective or add something in the comments or in a caption that explains to people why should they care about this. So if I'm going to, for example, share an article on social media marketing tips, let's say I find an article online, I want to share it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post it, but I'm also going to, in 1 or 2 lines, explain why I've chosen this article to share. So why should people care, and why did I pick that article versus all the other articles out there on the internet? So I think that is in a way sort of bringing more value to people, because of course they can just find some of this stuff on their own if they wanted to. I'm always cognizant of congratulating people where congratulations are due. I think if somebody gets a promotion, they take on a new project, then I'm always happy to congratulate them. It's so easy, especially with LinkedIn, because it takes like 1 second to do. So, why wouldn't you? And I am genuinely happy for people when they do post about their accomplishments. So I don't think it comes across as like I'm trying to kiss up to somebody, because I'm actually like, oh, cool. Like, Michael got a new job. That's amazing. I'm happy for him, because I'm like genuinely happy when people are, moving toward their goals or their dreams. And then with like Facebook and Instagram, which are sometimes like a little bit more like personal, but I still have industry contacts on there. I will just, sometimes just like or comment on their stuff. Again, just to show them that I've seen it, that I enjoyed it. If somebody has something happen in their life, like they get married or they have a child or something like that, of course, this is more on the Facebook, Instagram side. Then again, I always make sure to like chime in and let them know that I'm happy for them. I try to keep it positive as much as possible. I don't like to see people complaining on social media unless their complaint is driving something forward. So if there's, let's say, a cause that they're really passionate about and they're advocating for change, that's awesome. I like to see that. What I don't like is people that are just complaining about something and then wanting people to kind of agree with them in the comments. I don't really take that style or that approach. And what else can I tell you? I just try to stay engaged. Smartphones make it so easy. We have them with us at all times. So it's very convenient to be able to just hop on and participate in a discussion. And I like funny stuff too. I mean, some of the stuff that people post, I think is just like hilarious. So, I'll just let them know that I really enjoyed it, even if it just brightens your day for a minute, then I think that that's valuable too.
Yeah, I'm all for the memes right now. I know some people feel like people are making light of the situation, but I think it's helping people and getting them through, because I'm a big fan of meme culture.
Yeah, totally. And there's some really, really good ones out there. And yeah, it just makes you laugh. Then that is bringing value, right? That makes your day a little bit better.
Yeah. I did want to ask, you mentioned earlier you recently had a baby, and congratulations for somebody being actually able to voice that to you.
Thank
I just,
you.
how has that changed working from home though?
That's a good question. So my baby now is 3.5 months. And to be honest with you, I've been mostly off for the past few months since I had her. And I'm just kind of slowly starting to work part-time, just doing little things as I sort of ramp up and adjust. So I can't claim that I'm an expert by any means. I know there's other people out there who have like multiple children and they're also working like full time. They are absolute rock stars. Right now, to me, that seems like totally crazy, but people
Do not
can
envy them at
do
all.
it. Yeah, sometimes like a pet is enough, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, I have a very supportive partner, and I'm really lucky that way. So he will take baby if there's something that I need to do. So I'm not thinking about her. Like, even if she's sleeping, let's say, I'm still thinking like,
Yeah.
oh, is she going to wake up? And your mind is not quite focused on the task at hand. But I think going forward, it will be definitely a case of like structuring my time. So what I'll do is say, okay, on Tuesdays and Thursdays from, let's say, like 10 a.m. till 3 p.m., just sort of making this up right now, we'll figure it out. I'm going to do work. So then I'll block off that time to work and focus and go in the other room, shut the door, and just focus on that while the baby is cared for by my partner, or in some cases, getting somebody to come over and just paying them to watch her for a little while, I think is worthwhile. If people can do that, I think it's a good option. Not necessarily right now during the pandemic, but as things move forward, I think that can be really, money well spent if people can do that. But again, I'm lucky because I have a partner here who will help me out. My kid sleeps through the night, knock on wood. So, so far so good. I think it's harder for people who are up nights and then trying to function during the day. That is definitely, that's definitely can make things a little bit more challenging.
And I'm curious, someone who is, I assume legally you're a sole proprietor. Would that be correct?
Yes.
That's
yeah.
How do you manage that, having a child, like taking mat leave, and are you eligible for any benefits or anything along those lines? Because it's just not something I've ever heard brought up, so I thought I'd take the opportunity to talk about it if you're willing to.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I had the baby, I was a little bit concerned about that because I thought, okay, going without income for say a year, which is like the typical maternity leave in Canada, that's a lot, right?
Yeah.
So in my case, I had sort of been planning to have children. I was sort of waiting for the right time and so on, but I had some savings so that I didn't feel super anxious about the financial side of things. But I did also sign up for the government of Canada has now a EI program for self-employed people. And I registered for that a couple of years ago. So you have to pay into that for at least a year before you can make any claims. But I was able to get some maternity benefits through that. It's not a ton, but it is nice to, have that income coming in. And that will last a year. I won't probably take a whole year though. As I said, I'm already like starting to do small things. And I think by September, I'll really be sort of back in the swing of things. But that program, I think, can be really good. The only catch I would say is that you have to pay into it for the length of your self-employed career. So you have to kind of ask yourself, is that worth it? If I'm going to say have one kid, and I'm going to use those benefits for 1 year or 6 months, but I'm going to pay into it until I retire. If you do the math, you have to figure out, okay, is that worth it for you? And I think each person has to kind of make their own decision on that front. But like I said, I was able to sort of plan it a little bit in advance. Also, my partner is taking paternity leave for a couple of months, and that's super useful. I know a lot of guys are doing that now, and I love that. Most workplaces will have some type of program for paternity leave, or so that the other partner, whether it's a same-sex couple or whatever the case is, one partner can take some of those months, and it's sort of subtracted from the primary caregiver's EI benefits. So there's lots of information online for folks who may be sort of curious about how that program works. But for me, it's worked so far, so I'm happy about that.
Yeah. And what else does that EI cover you for? Like if you're decide that like you can't get work, does that cover you for that, or?
That's a good question. I'm not an expert in the terms around that. No. I think it's more for like sickness or if you're sort of not able to work, maybe you're in a car crash or something like that. I think it might cover you for those types of scenarios, but I'm not sure how far it would extend. Like if your business started to slow down, I'm not certain that they would cover in those type of instances. But certainly there would be more information on that online.
Yeah, sorry. I'm putting Emily on the spot here. I didn't
No, it's all good.
but I'm curious.
I just don't want to say the wrong thing, and then
That's
somebody's
fair.
like, "Wait, what?"
But it's good to know because, like, I feel like a lot of people would put freelancing or consulting off because they feel when they do want to have a family, it's going to be a hindrance. So that's actually really informative to know. So thank you for that. Um,
Yeah.
so I wanted to also talk about we probably have a lot of managers online and also people who might be running social media that have to train their employees on how to use it. You're a marketing educator. You do this in person, obviously, but you also do online courses. On the online side, do you have any tips on how to keep people engaged or just to run a better education program for your employees or any webinars you might have to be running in the future, which I'm sure all of us marketers will be?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's amazing to see so many people delivering webinars and participating in webinars and forums and things like that. So I work in the Canadian Marketing Association's Chartered Marketer program, which is a new program which is delivered 100% online to folks all across Canada. There's even folks in other countries who can participate. I also teach in the McMaster University's Digital Marketing Certificate Program, which also is delivered 100% online. And I also have delivered many webinars over the years. And I think the key to success in all of these things is providing content that's going to spark some type of discussion. So with webinars, the temptation is for people to kind of, turn it on like they're watching TV, and then they get distracted because their dog starts barking or they get hungry or they have to get the laundry, something like that, because they're in their homes a lot of the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you want to do what you want to do is you want to sort of spark some type of discussion and get them sort of participating. So you want to give them good content at the beginning of the session, give them some food for thought, let them sort of digest that, and then ask them, do you have questions? What can I help you with? What's on your mind? And if nobody jumps at the very first second of you asking, give them some time to digest that. So if you say, okay, who has questions? And then the line is quiet, keep the discussion going for a few more minutes, because sometimes people don't want to be the first one to say, well, I didn't really understand what you were saying about one thing. Can you go back? Some people are not shy about speaking on a call or speaking on a webinar, but you have to remember that not everyone is used to learning in that style, or they may not be comfortable with the tools that they're being asked to use. So I always try to do my best to make people feel like they're getting something out of the session, whether it's a webinar or whether it's an online course, and then asking them for their thoughts. And if you feel like you're not getting a lot of participation, or you feel like people are kind of being shy or they're not that engaged, then start off with like a super easy question, like, what are some cool things you've seen brands do online in the past week or so? Like, open with a question that's kind of broad, gets them sort of talking. And then usually what I find is then other people are more willing to chime into that discussion because it's a little bit less intimidating for them. With any online program, participation is a must. So if you're running a course or you're running a webinar and all you're doing is spewing information at people, that's really not that helpful for them, because they can just go find a lot of that information themselves on the internet. What you want to do as a facilitator, as a teacher, as a manager, is to sort of motivate them and inspire them to think about how they can apply those learnings to their current job or to their current project. So what would that look like for you? You can ask questions like that. What are some things you're wondering about? Let's talk about that at our next session. So you kind of get the wheels turning, and you do that little by little, and you build up over time. It's not going to be like this amazing discussion straight out the gate, but your job is to kind of get those people thinking in a new direction, and hopefully get them wanting to learn more.
Mm-hmm. And is there any kind of tools that you would recommend for people? Maybe some interactive aspects that we're maybe not thinking about?
Yeah, there's so many tools now. It's amazing. Like I've used Zoom. I've used uh, there's a platform called D2L, which is sort of more specific to the college or university community, and that's an online platform that will deliver pretty much anything you want online, like videos, written content, articles, YouTube videos. You can pull from any different place and put them all there. I like Google
Sorry, what? That was
Documents as well.
D2L?
D2L, yes.
D2L.
Two, like the number. Yeah.
Curious about that one. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, it's all good. And I think the Google Suite is perfectly useful for many people. It's basically free. Most people have a Gmail account anyway, so it's very accessible. I think accessibility is key. If you're asking people who are already a little bit stressed about a change in their employment status or a change in their role to then go and learn some complicated tool, you're kind of maybe going to stress them out a little bit more. Some people are really great with technology. Some people struggle with it a little bit more. I think your job as a manager is to give people the resources they need. If you're asking them to learn a new skill or a new tool, then you need to support them in doing that and point them towards some references or some tutorials perhaps online that they can access as well. So yeah, I would definitely start with Google Suite, with G Suite, because it does have so many of those features that most people need. But if you want to record something and send it out that way, I think Zoom is a good option. I'm seeing a lot of people use Zoom now, and I find it works pretty well too.
Amazing. Well, I do want to pick your brain while I've got you on here. So we, a little over 2 years ago now, did the first Content Talks panel together, and the topic at the time was the state of content marketing, but it ended up basically being the state of social media because it was all about social media at the time. And from memory, I think we kind of told people that unless they're willing to pay a lot of money, stay off Facebook. LinkedIn was growing in popularity. Twitter was dying in popularity. Snapchat had just changed their layout and killed themselves a little bit. Twitch didn't exist. What else has happened in the last few
TikTok
years?
didn't exist.
TikTok didn't exist. Instagram was. I don't actually remember talking about Instagram that much at the time, so I don't know if that's growing, but I feel like 2 years ago it was still pretty big. But I guess I'm gonna ask because I at the time I was working at a magazine where I was using these tools a lot. Now I work at a B2B publication where I just essentially use LinkedIn and Twitter. Can I pick your brain? What's happened in the last 2 years with social media and like where should people be looking to invest their time and money?
Oh, I feel like so much has happened in the past 2 years. I mean, I probably couldn't go through every platform, but generally what I'm seeing is LinkedIn has seen huge growth, particularly with the news feed features. So I'm seeing a lot more people participating, particularly in like the marketing world and the business world. A lot more people having discussions, sharing content, adding videos, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Definitely just more people using it. I'm getting flooded
Yeah.
with connection requests. Sometimes I think that the connection requests have gone a little bit too far in the sense that people are being discriminate enough with who they're adding. They're just like trying to flood the tool with, try to get as many people as they can. That's
Yeah.
not the best approach. But overall, I am pleased to see that LinkedIn is growing because I do think it's a really valuable tool for people in our industry. If you're like a nurse or an electrician or something like that, is LinkedIn going to be that valuable for you? No. But for folks like us who work in digital, who work in marketing or anything related to that, I think it's really important.
Yeah.
With Instagram, I think 2 years ago, Instagram was pretty popular. I remember our discussion at that time at Content Talks, but stories have really taken off.
Yeah.
So you're
They
seeing
kind
a
of taken that
lot.
from Snap, so I think that's why we were just in that transition.
That's right. Yeah. I remember saying that actually. They'd kind of ripped off Snapchat in a way, and
100%.
I guess it kind of worked for them because stories are so popular, and just regular sort of Instagram users are posting them, but also brands are posting them, and there's Instagram stories ads as well. We're seeing a lot of ad stories, and the research that I've seen has indicated that that type of content is working well for brands. So the money they're spending on ads that are placed in stories is by most accounts money well spent. So I think that that's something that's relatively recent growth. Twitter, funny enough, I remember a couple of years ago kind of thinking, well, Twitter's kind of plateaued. It's not,
Yeah.
seeing a ton of growth. People were even sort of saying, is it even going to last? It looked like it was maybe dwindling a little bit at that time. But now I feel like I'm on Twitter all the time, especially with the pandemic. All the news is coming out on Twitter. It's breaking on Twitter. And I'm seeing a ton of people on there and just loads and loads of content coming through quickly. And also, a few more features. Twitter is I would say a little bit more simple in its collection of features than some of the other platforms in some ways. But the addition of GIFs is kind of fun. I like that GIFs when my tweets sometimes, and I'm seeing a lot of that, so it's more interactive. And then of course TikTok is like massive. I have TikTok. I admit I don't use it a ton. But a lot of people are now sharing TikTok content on their Instagram. So all these TikTok videos are now appearing on Instagram. So it's so fascinating to me to watch how people consume content on these different platforms and how they choose to use it. I think with TikTok, one thing that's interesting is that you can like download and share TikTok content to other platforms very, very easily.
Smart.
So that was one sort of thing that they implemented, I think that's really paying off.
Yeah, no, it's such a smart idea because you see the logo and you're like, I haven't done it yet. I haven't jumped over, but I'm getting there. I think one day I will. Although the new one, and I immediately tried to look up stock options for this last week, was House Party.
Oh my God. Yes, we just had a house party call. Call? Do you call
I don't know what it. Yeah, something.
The other
We'll
night,
figure it
and
out.
it's great. Yeah, exactly. I want to play some of the games. I've only had like a video call with a bunch of friends, but I want to play some of the games that are inside the app. So that might be my weekend plans.
We'll see how they monetize that. I could see like branded house parties or something kicking in pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like I noticed one of the games is called Chips and Guac. So I'm like, wouldn't it be perfect for like a Doritos brand or something
Oh
like
my
that
God,
to like
yeah.
hop on that? Like that would be perfect.
Yeah, 100%. No, I think it's gonna be interesting to see how that grows because it's perfect timing, really.
Yeah.
uh,
It couldn't be better timing actually. Everybody's at home looking for something to do.
so I'm just quickly at the end here. I did want to see if you have seen any brands that have been able to uh, do some exceptional work during this pandemic, or on the other end, seen some really bad examples. And generally, what's your recommendation to any communicators out there and how they should be handling this?
Yeah, it's unprecedented times, really. I think that first off, we have to, as a brand, acknowledge what's going on. So the folks that I think are kind of missing the mark are the ones that are just continuing to talk about themselves like nothing is even happening. People are not in the mood for that, and people have some pretty serious concerns about their own lives at the moment. Not really in the mood to see somebody like talking about themselves. If people or brands sort of acknowledge what's going on and to understand that people are struggling, and sort of then they find a way to sort of serve those people. So, for example, if a brand is providing humor through all of this, that's great. So I quite like the comedian Trevor Noah. His Instagram account is quite funny, but he also talks about the seriousness of what's going on with the pandemic and brings in experts to give people more information on how they can protect themselves. So he'll get interviews with some of the country's like leading health professionals, but then he'll also be telling jokes at the same time, like in the same sort of segment. I'm not sure if you watch his show, but he's moved it to his home, like many of the sort of television hosts have in the US at the moment. So he's basically doing it from home and providing that sort of thoughtful content, but also like the same humor that we've come to enjoy if you happen to be a Trevor Noah fan, me. So I like what he's done. He's done a great job. I follow brands like BlogTO and Narcity for news, just because the news is changing really quickly. I think they're doing a pretty good job of staying on top of things. And they'll share content through their Instagram. So now Instagram is sort of like a place where you can go and get your breaking news. Who knew?
And I found that over the last few days too. I started following Narcity and BlogTO, and it's like, oh, it's actually really good just to see the headlines, and then they've got that link series in there as well. I think it's a really great use of that tool.
Exactly. And then logically you would click the link in their bio if you want to get the full story. They're giving you the snippet, and that's often enough to pique your interest or at least get you read into the caption where you can get more details. So I think that they're doing a really great job there. And Erin Bury, who is a Torontonian, is doing a great job with her company Willful. You can check her out. Her personal brand is very good and very strong across all social media platforms, and she's done a great job in building the Willful brand as well. And one thing I really like about what she's doing is she's figuring out ways during this time to really create useful content, and she's really working to help people. So for example, she'll share each day a series of small businesses that people can support. So it might be like a jewelry shop, it might be like a meal service, it might be a cookie store, this collection of all these different businesses that people may not know about, and then people can check them out by clicking the link. And in that way, she's sort of helping people to support those smaller businesses that are a little bit more at risk at a time like this, while still getting the message out and providing services to people online rather than in person.
Yeah, and I think it's the time for the free trial.
Totally.
I was surprised. I had a phone call with a PR tracking company, essentially. And you track your brand online, and they just upsold us the whole time. And they're like, and in my mind, I'm like, give us a free trial. We don't have any budget. We cannot get anything approved right now, but give us a 6-month free trial. Get our partners used to this tool that you have, and then when we are in the clear, we'll use your tool.
Exactly.
But it kind of left a sour taste in our mouths because it was just selling so hard to us, and we kept trying to put the meeting off because we're like, we've got newsletters to put out about like our response to this crisis, but they were just pushing hard, and then and they were like giving this extremely expensive package for us to buy. I'm like, no, there's no way we can get that right. Thanks. But like, this is a good time to like get people in habits of using your product, and I think
exactly. And you're also like helping people out in a way, like, okay, maybe they don't have a huge budget right now, but maybe in 3 months they will. So give them the first 3 months for free, and then they'll probably be loyal to you if you have a good product. Whereas like if you're just talking about yourself or trying to get that sale like you were 6 months ago, then like that's not going to fly. Like times have changed, and the best brands are the ones that are able to pivot quickly and like change their messaging, check those scheduled posts and maybe like scrap those ones and come up with a whole new plan, right? That's kind of what you have to do.
Yeah, no, 100%. And if I see another Squarespace ad, I've seen probably 100 a day on YouTube. I'm like, I get it.
Oh God, yeah.
But if they want to sponsor the show, it's been great chatting with you, Emily. I really appreciate you being the first one, as you were the first panelist. It seems full
Yay!
circle. Always the first person to
Yeah,
change
thank you
off.
for having me.
Do you have anything you want to plug? Any social media handles? Any programs that you might be teaching?
Oh, well, you can check me out on Twitter. I'm at Emily Baillie. I'm also on Instagram at Emily Baillie Social. Follow along, and I'll be sharing content about any projects or courses that may be coming up. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to add me there. And yeah, I love connecting with people. I know you have a really great audience that you've built up, Michael, with all of your hard work over the past couple of years. So it's been really great working with you and getting to know some new folks in the audience. As I sort of transition out of the mommy role and more into work again, I'm going to be looking at doing more custom webinars for organizations who are looking to upskill. Particularly around social media platforms. So in the past, I've done a lot of sessions for companies that want to make better use of their Instagram or their Twitter or their LinkedIn or their Facebook, and how exactly do they do that? So more of that will be to come. If people have questions about that, I'm happy to chat. I that now is such a great time for people to really dive into these online learning tools and upskill and learn something new or make some new connections, because let's face it, we all have some time on our hands.
Yeah.
So we might as well do something productive with it.
I'm gonna finally get that Google Analytics certification.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, thanks for chatting. I hope to continue doing these beyond crisis time, so we'll have to get you on and go a bit more in depth on social media and get some tips out of you then. But thanks for joining us today.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
So there it is, my first ever podcast interview. A bit like my panel, I'm kind of making it up as I go, but I hope you learned a lot from Emily there, and I'd like to thank her again for joining me on this first ever podcast. I do have more lined up, but if you have any feedback, please reach out on the socials or email me at michael@contenttalks.ca. If you want to support the podcast, please subscribe, like, rate, and all that fun stuff. And also, if you could share with any peers in marketing, that would be fantastic as well. Until the next episode, stay safe and take care of yourselves. I will talk to you again soon.